The Fix Your Fatigue podcast. Whether you can't get out of bed in the morning, your energy crashes throughout the day, or you're a biohacker looking to optimize your energy, productivity, and focus, this podcast is for you. I am Dr. Evan Hirsch, and I will be your host on your journey to resolving fatigue and optimizing your energy. And we'll be interviewing some of the top leaders in the world on fatigue resolution. Welcome. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fix Your Fatigue podcast. I'm so glad that you're here with me today, because today we're going to be talking about lupus and exhaustion, or lupus and fatigue, with my good friend Margaret Romero. So let's learn a little bit about Margaret. So Margaret Romero, nurse practitioner, is a Columbia University trained nurse practitioner. She utilizes functional medicine to treat chronic illness, autoimmunity, and women's health issues. She has been a clinical instructor and has taught functional integrative medicine at Columbia University. She is the host of the Sacred Medicine podcast and author of From Flare to Fabulous, 25 Things You Must Do to Avoid Your Next Lupus Flare. If you got lupus, I would definitely be checking that out, because that sounds like it would be really helpful. So we're going to dive in and talk about tips to overcoming lupus exhaustion. Margaret, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this topic.
Me too.
So let's start off with your lupus journey. Please take us through that.
All right. This was in 2007. I was diagnosed with lupus after having extreme muscle and joint pain. And I ended up having severe anemia. And I had also kidney involvement. But at the end of it all, I had multi-organ involvement, and which means my liver was affected. So my liver functions were through the roof. I had pleurisy. I had an enlarged heart. I was a hot mess back then. And hair was falling out. I had gained like 30 pounds of water weight from all of the steroids they were pumping into me at the time. And it was just one of the hardest times in my life. And, I was in such bad shape that I had to see the doctor like twice a week. I had to go see the rheumatologist and the nephrologist, and they had to get bloods and make sure that I was stable and okay. And, at one point I was medi-flighted actually from one hospital to another. It was, I was in crisis for sure. So at the time, I started to notice that every time I ate, my joints, especially my knees, would get so red and so swollen. And I was like, what the hell is going on? So I went to my rheumatologist that week. I said, look, I want to be tested for celiac. I want the DNA test because something's going on. I'm getting inflamed after I eat. It just makes sense. She said, save your money. You don't need the test. Just take your medications and that's it. And at the time I was taking 20 pills per day and still feeling like utter crap. I could barely walk at this point, like despite the meds, like I could do nothing. I was sitting there. I wasn't working. My parents were taking care of me. They were cooking my food. I was in so much pain. And so that's how it all began.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That sounds really challenging. Can you define for us what lupus is?
So lupus is an autoimmune condition. What a lot of practitioners say, like your body is attacking itself. Your body is attacking particular organs, tissues. And the most common actually symptoms are joint pain, muscle pain, hair loss, also a butterfly rash, which I did have as well. Super, super sensitive to the sun. Anytime I would be in the sun, I would get a rash wherever the sun would hit. And that's really, really common. So, and that's sort of that typical presentation. And then of course, with the lab work with ANA positive and high titers and all of that. So Lupus is an autoimmune condition, and there's many. There's Sjogren's and MS. So basically, we're just trying to find there is just an overwhelming inflammation that's in the body, and so that's how it presents. And so the body is inflamed, and it shows it in the joints, it shows it in muscles. At least for me, that was the biggest presentation. Not everyone with lupus has as severe symptoms that I had, but it largely is pain and fatigue. Those are like the two biggest ones. And then of course, the butterfly rash, of course, like I mentioned, and the hair involvement and the hair loss.
Yeah, and it makes sense that, fatigue would be part of that, because what we found is that these causes of fatigue that we're going to talk about today are also the causes of autoimmunity. They're triggering the immune system to become dysfunctional and start to attack different parts of the body. Has that been your experience as well?
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And so you talked about how it's kind of global, where the immune system is attacking all sorts of different parts of the body. You talked about a number of different organ systems. Is there a particular component of those organs that the body is attacking? With rheumatoid arthritis, we get autoimmunity to the joints for the most part, right? If we get MS, it's autoimmunity to the myelin sheaths. Right. So with lupus, is there a particular component or a particular cell that it's reacting against?
Well, we would, lupus nephritis, which is when it attacks the kidneys, is also a really huge, it's one of the most common presentations, but there's also cutaneous, so it's affecting the skin. And so there's discoid as well. And so it can attack different body parts, different organ systems. Kidneys are one of the most common.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about fatigue and lupus. So why do so many people who have lupus also have fatigue?
Oh, wow. So there's so many reasons for fatigue. And I think that, lupus doesn't come about overnight. Autoimmunity happens, it takes years, and it starts out really subtle, and sort of the body whispers very small symptoms. For me, it was severe constipation. In the beginning, it was mild, and then it became very severe. And so for me, it started in my gut. At the time, I wasn't really into functional medicine. Autoimmunity was not what I was teaching or helping people with. So I just thought it was constipation. And so I would have to get colonics and all of that. So for me, it started in the gut, but it can affect the fatigue can come from so many things. And I think that if we start at the gut, which for me, that's what happened. And for every single one of my patients, when I do a stool test, I am checking for everything. So we check for pathogens and candida. And if gluten is causing an issue, there's just so many things, so many valuable things that we can learn from a stool test. And so for me, what I've seen clinically is that it starts there. And then most people have leaky gut because their symptoms began like years ago and years ago. And so as the body starts to have these, chronic inflammatory processes happening, leaky gut happens due to pathogens secondary to parasites or worms or H. pylori or candida, unknowingly. So the person doesn't know that they have all of this going on. Leaky gut happens, and then we'll see vitamin deficiencies. Then it'll affect hormones, and then hormones, it'll affect the thyroid. And then if gluten is an issue, it's affecting your thyroid. And so it's so complex, the reasons why people have fatigue, because there's so many things involved. And there's just a cascade of things that continue to happen. One is triggering another thing, causing deficiency here and there. And so, aside from like B12 and iron deficiencies, that will cause fatigue. But also when you have a chronic illness, your mitochondria is also being affected. And those are the powerhouses within each of your cells. And so when those are affected, your body cannot, it just does it, you just have no vitality. You cannot get through the day when your mitochondria is being affected, when it's overwhelmed with information and your body is in constant like sympathetic. It's constantly in fight or flight. Like your body, there's no relaxation. At night, you're stressed, you can't sleep, your adrenals aren't being replenished when you're sleeping. So there's so many factors here. I don't even know where to begin. I just kind of like threw out a bunch of things, but what were you, does that kind of explain things, or did I just go off in a tangent?
No, you did great. So then in terms of the other symptoms of lupus, so I guess I'm curious if when you start to heal the fatigue, do the other symptoms of lupus also get better, or can you isolate it where it's like, okay, we're going to boost your energy over here by taking these supplements or doing these things, and then over here is addressing your autoimmunity and your other symptoms? Or is it more global? You address certain things and everything gets better. What do you find?
So great question. I have some patients that like want to heal everything all at once and want it fast, want it now, need to be healed tomorrow. And the body just doesn't heal that way. And so where I see nutritional deficiencies, those are replenished with supplements, right? And then we'll remove all of the foods that are also causing issues with fatigue too. I mean, you could have food sensitivities. I also check for that in case that can cause people to be tired, feel fatigued, not feel good, have reactions, have rashes. And so I do sort of a step-by-step process, but eventually all organ systems and like everything is eventually being fully evaluated, sort of like from head to toe. And then we're doing it in sort of a stepwise, because I have patients who want to like detox, or they come to me on a detox. And I'm like, no, 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 no. No, you cannot be on a detox right now because you've been chronically ill for so long. Your body cannot go through a detox safely. It just can't. So we have to do things like really step by step, replenishing one thing. Yes, it'll give them energy. Some of the supplements, they'll start to feel better while the gut is healing, while we're giving also supplements to heal the gut, or getting rid of the pathogens, or getting rid of the candida, or they're also on a candida diet, things like that. So we're sort of doing things at the same time, but we're doing it really slowly. I don't do anything aggressive.
Amen. I always say slow and steady wins the race. The body
Yes,
likes small changes.
definitely.
So then what would you say are kind of like the top three? You've mentioned a number of them, but we're like, what are the top three causes of fatigue with lupus?
So one would be pathogens in the gut. That's definitely a major issue. It is also what causes inflammation. Next would be vitamin deficiencies, severe. I've seen severe ones. And then the third one would be, so if the first one was nutritional deficiencies, obviously we're looking at iron and all, B12, right? Then I'm looking at your gut, and let's get rid of those pathogens. Those are really dragging you down. And then the other one would be looking at the hormones as well, especially the thyroid. Thyroid antibodies seem to be, for some reason, like the test that nobody ever runs. I don't know why. Thyroid antibodies, like a TSH is drawn, and if that looks fine, then sort of investigation stops there in conventional medicine. But I'm really looking at the hormones, and it also depends on a woman's age, where their female hormones are as well.
So what do the thyroid antibodies give you? What are you looking for with those?
So I'm looking to see if they also have an autoimmune issue with the thyroid. And there's a couple of different ones like thyroid peroxidase and what's the other side?
Microsomal or the thyroglobulin?
Thyroglobulin. Yeah, thyroglobulin. So those two, are the very first things that I check. And if we have an issue there, they're getting off gluten like right now, like yesterday, you're getting off gluten. Anyone with autoimmune, for me, they got off gluten for at least 6 to 9 months. If they have a thyroid issue, if they have Hashimoto's, those are uncovered. I don't find Hashimoto's to be very difficult to reverse. It's pretty easy once you get them on some good supplements and a really good diet, and also helping out with their stress. That's another huge one.
So when you say reverse, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say when you say you don't find it that hard to reverse Hashimoto's, you're talking about seeing the autoimmunity, the autoimmune markers go away, or are you talking about like being able to take people off of the thyroid medication?
Definitely thyroid antibodies go away, go down like every 3 months. And also to the point where they may not need thyroid medication. It depends. The scenario also, if their thyroid is low due secondary to their adrenal function, then sometimes it takes a little bit longer for those adrenals to sort of come back, especially if they've been given like tons and tons of prednisone for years and years. It's sometimes a little bit, it just takes the adrenals a little longer to come back. And they may need that thyroid support. If you need the thyroid support, you need the thyroid support. Sometimes I put them on compounded thyroid meds, or sometimes they need a little, depends what their numbers look like. They may need a little T3 and while we're still healing and diet is changing.
That makes sense. And so I would guess that the number of people who have lupus, I mean, we know that if you have one autoimmune condition, you're a lot more likely to have another autoimmune, right? So I would imagine that there's a high number of people who have lupus who also have Hashimoto's. Is that true?
Who have a large number of
both. Yeah, if you've got lupus, you're, so many more times likely to have Hashimoto's.
I would say no, that's not, I don't necessarily see the correlation of lupus and then you have Hashimoto's. I see the correlation of it started off as celiac, then became lupus, and then becomes Sjogren's, or I see Sjogren's and lupus as like the two double headers that come together. I see those really popular.
Interesting.
And the third one could be celiac. I see those are the three that usually are the trio.
So when you take people off of gluten, what do you see in people who have lupus?
I see, oh my gosh, a reduction in their pain. That's number one. They used to get a lot of gas and bloating after eating. And so there'd be a huge reduction in those GI symptoms. They would stop becoming, or stop having constipation. Maybe their diarrhea has lessened as well. And so gluten also causes a lot of brain fog. Gluten brain is a thing, it's real. And so brain fog, memory issues a lot of it, will start to subside.
And do you have any favorite tricks for getting rid of brain fog?
That's a good one. So for me, it also depends on, okay, is it gluten? Is it heavy metals? Is it, leaky gut, leaky brain? Like what's actually going on? So I kind of do some investigation, but I love PQQ. I love PQQ for brain. There's a combination. There's this Dr. Amen he's got these great brain supplements. And so he's got a great powder that's got so many things, so amazing. Have you ever used any of his protocol? So I've started giving it to my parents because we've got some cognitive issues, and I've definitely seen some nice changes. And so if I have it, severe, I would consider that. But sometimes just removing the gluten will help. And then while we're healing the gut, that it all helps.
Excellent. And what is PQQ for our listeners out there?
Oh gosh, I don't even know what that stands for. Um,
Well, you don't have to, I
it's
mean, what is
long,
it?
it's so long. I actually use that in combination also with CoQ10.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen those combinations with it really helps with mitochondria too. It is, for me, it has been one of the number one, like, brain enhancers, along with also, I have to admit, balancing hormones in women. Sometimes it's menopausal,
Mm-hmm.
and with very low estrogen levels. And so, depending on the age, if a woman has just getting her, normal periods every month, clockwork, everything is good. I don't typically need to check their hormones, but if I've got someone perimenopause and going into menopause, then I do check. And depending on their symptoms, I used to do a lot of hormone replacement therapy, but I do see a lot of brain fog in women who are peri and going into menopause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you said, PQQ and mitochondrial support really helps with balancing out those hormones. And that's what I've seen as well. There's so much that we've learned about mitochondrial function over the last, 2 decades.
Oh
And and the fact that it improves absorption of hormones at the cellular level, function, its relationship to some of these other hormones. Yeah, I could see why the PQQ would also be really helpful. And I think that PQQ increases the number of mitochondria.
yes.
Mhm, yeah,
So
excellent,
yeah, it's one of the things that I also have my parents taking, and it's also in that powder.
excellent. Yeah, we like to use it in our mitochondrial support as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then, um, when you're looking at fatigue in lupus, you talked a little bit about some of the tests, but what sort of tests do you like to run?
Oh wow. There's so many. I mean, aside from like stool tests, are you talking more like blood work?
Sure. Yeah, whatever you can share with our audience. Stool test you
Um,
mentioned.
so stool test is number one with autoimmunity. And then I do a very comprehensive lab work that checks for vitamin deficiencies. There's also, I mean, there's just so many functional tests that could be run. I mean, there's cellular nutritional testing, and there's, but most people want to utilize their insurance. So we'll do it that route to see what we can uncover. So then there, I will also, depending on if they've had exposure or they don't know if they've had exposure to heavy metals, there's an option to do it with blood work. There's also an option to do hair analysis as well. And then sometimes we've got mold, and mold will cause fatigue.
Hmm.
Mold makes autoimmune conditions worse. And I love doing this urine mold test. And I mean, there's no other test for me that compares out there. And so mold testing is also something. I will check a C4A in the blood work to see what that number looks like. And if I get a high number, we move on into the urine test.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So then, what does you talked about, like, going through a step-by-step process with your lupus patients? What does that look like?
So the first things that I do is I start with blood work and the stool. So we start there because even if I did like 5 or 6 tests and a million things came back, like, we have to really, like, the gut comes first. Like, we have to heal that and get rid of those pathogens. Like, that's the immune system is sort of like housed um, in the gut. So when the gut is destroyed by pathogens and what have you, so that's normally where I'll start let's get you replenished. Let's get those supplement levels. Let's get those vitamin levels up. Let's do the stool testing. Let's get rid of whatever we find in there and really build up. So you've got some good reserves to move on to like the next thing. And so then we could potentially move into mold testing. We move into, I already would have checked hormones and knowing what's going on there. Maybe the next step would be like adrenals and then working on the adrenals. Like we can't do everything all at once. It just becomes overwhelming because with each thing, there's like a little bit of a different diet, you know. With adrenals, there's a different way of living and being if you have very low adrenal function, or if your adrenal number is through the roof too, then there's a certain way to be and to live. And some people, you can't have 5 cups of coffee anymore. And so we do it. And does that make sense? Like we're doing step by step, a new test like every month or 2 months, and then uncovering that and healing that.
And what is the natural progression of improvement in lupus and in the lupus symptoms in your programs? So somebody joins your program now, where would you like them to be in 6 months? Where would you like them to be in a year? Like, what does that timeline look like with all this?
Yes. Okay. I love this question. So if they start like in January and we, even with just the bloods and the stool, I would suspect that by the time, like even less than 3 months, like between month 2 and 3, I should see some resolution. Like you should not be in so much pain anymore. And if you are, we need to definitely dig deeper. But I'd say 85% of my patients have already a reduction in their pain and they're feeling a lot better. Then by the time month 6 hits, you know, even more, like their sinus infections are gone, their allergy symptoms have lessened. They're just feeling more vital and more like themselves. So they start to forget like what all of the symptoms they had when they first came in, because I'm always checking on those like every 3 to 6 months. Like, okay, you first told me you were getting like headaches like every single day. How are those going? And those headaches are gone, or they only have like 1 a month rather than 4 times a week. And so I start to see the reduction in so many of their symptoms.
Excellent. And it sounds like you're using lifestyle changes, dietary changes, supplements, anything else?
And would lifestyle mean also like the stress levels and how to also reduce stress, more self-care? And so we talk about that. They tell me their deepest, darkest secrets and if they've been through trauma. And so we talk about all of that. Yeah.
That's such important work. And
It
that's
is.
such a big part of all this, those negative emotional patterns.
Yes. And, you know, it's vital in order to help fully heal. And I will tell you that it is one of the things that people do not want to deal or face with. They really don't. So there's that vital component that's left out and sort of ignored, even though I'm there and I'm, you know, though I'm not a therapist. And if I have them, you know, go to work with someone else, some women are very against it. They just don't want to face the demons, you know?
It's hard.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You know, it's uncomfortable. It's unknown. But in the right hands, you know, I think it's the most important work that we can do.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. So where can people go to learn more about you, Margaret?
Let's see. So I've got a podcast called the Sacred Medicine Podcast. You mentioned my book. I'm on Instagram every single day. So I love Instagram. It's Margaret Romero on Instagram. not really on Facebook. And my website is margaretromero.com.
Wonderful. And you have a free thing for our audience, which is margaretromero.com/challenge. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it's a 7-day lupus challenge. And every single day, I give you one thing that you can change in your life, maybe removing a particular food or implementing something into your daily life. And so the challenge is can you do all 7 of them? And I love it. I think it really helps people just to kind of like, oh, really? I never thought about this, or I never thought about doing that. Or, well, removing gluten, it's not an overnight thing, but how about just removing like one thing that you're always eating? Like if it's pasta, like just replace it with gluten-free pasta.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a challenge that's been around for a while, but I feel like people get a lot out of it. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. If you've got lupus, go ahead, dive into that challenge, get started today. Well, Margaret, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate the value that you brought. And if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so that you don't miss any more episodes. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more fatigued people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have on fatigue is one of my absolute favorite things to do. If you'd like more information, please sign up for my newsletter, where I share all important facts and information about fatigue, from the foods and supplements to the programs and products that I use personally and recommend to others so that they can live their best lives. Just go to fixyourfatigue.com/newsletter to sign up, and I will send you this great information. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you're looking for help with your fatigue, you can visit my website and work with us at fixyourfatigue.com. And remember, it's important that you have someone in your corner who is a credentialed healthcare professional to help you make changes. This is very important, especially when it comes to your health. Thanks for listening, and have